I did not fail the exam. I failed the moment I decided the grade defined my entire existence. And that decision, that invisible, self-imposed weight, is what killed my spirit long before I ever saw the passing mark. Stop right there. Before you scroll away, before your mind drifts to the next email or the grocery list, consider that sentence. That's not hyperbole. That is the confession of a man who once carried an invisible albatross, a weight so massive it nearly crushed him, yet it existed only in the space between his ears. We all have one. We call it regret or anxiety, or sometimes just the to-do list of the soul. This is the story of Elias Thorne, a man who possessed a perfect life on paper but was systematically destroying himself with the meticulous architecture of what if. Elias lived in the gleaming, hyper-connected city of Viridia, a place where success was measured in quarterly reports and visible metrics. At 35, he was the chief logistics planner for a global shipping firm, a position that demanded absolute precision and relentless foresight. He had the high-rise apartment with the view that made his colleagues jealous, the bespoke suits, and the quiet, steady respect of his peers. On the outside, Elias was the definition of ascension. But inside, Elias was a prisoner of the archive. His mind was not a tool for planning. It was a massive cross-reference library dedicated solely to stored failures and predicted catastrophes. Every action, every word spoken years ago was cataloged, scrutinized, and reenacted mightily in the theater of his insomnia. If he forgot to send an email confirmation to a client in Singapore 3 months prior, his mind wouldn't simply note it. It would write a 500-word script detailing the resulting multi-million-dollar loss and his ensuing public firing. If he had a mildly awkward interaction with a junior associate at the water cooler, his mind would fast-forward to that associate's eventual promotion over him, citing the awkwardness as the singular damning evidence of his social incompetence. The present moment was a mere inconvenience, a tiny, fleeting gap between the crushing weight of the past and the looming threat of the future. Sleep was a luxury he hadn't genuinely enjoyed in years. When he closed his eyes, the archive opened. He would wake up exhausted, not from physical labor, but from the marathon sprints his consciousness ran all night. His physical health began to betray him. A constant, low-grade tension in his neck felt like granite. His digestion was a battlefield, and his doctor warned him, "Elias, your cortisol levels look like you're training for a war that isn't happening." One Tuesday morning, the weight became tangible. Elias was on a vital video call with the Tokyo team. He was explaining a complex realignment of shipping routes. His expertise was unquestioned. Mid-sentence, his mind hiccuped. He didn't forget the data. He remembered, vividly, the time 10 years ago when he forgot his mother's birthday. The two events had zero connection, yet the memory flashed so brightly it eclipsed the screen. His mouth moved, saying something about contingency buffers, but his focus was entirely gone. The Tokyo executive frowned. "Mr. Thorne, are you there? You seem dislocated." Elias snapped back, his face flushing crimson. "Apologies, a momentary lapse. As I was saying, the buffer zone must be maintained at a minimum of 18%. He corrected the data, but the damage was done. Not to the shipment, but to him. He felt a profound, humiliating sense of fragmentation. He was split into 1,000 pieces, only one of which was present for the multi-million-dollar conversation. That evening, defeated, he found himself staring out his 40th floor window, not admiring the city lights, but calculating the approximate cost of a catastrophic structural failure that would send the entire building into the harbor. It was irrational, ludicrous, and utterly compelling. He realized with a chilling clarity that he was not living, he was managing the metadata of his own impending doom. The ascent to the quiet place. In a moment of absolute desperation, Elias remembered a discarded piece of advice from a colleague years ago, something about a man who lived simply, teaching the art of unburdening far outside the city limits. Elias, the man who optimized global supply chains, decided to optimize his soul. He took 3 days of emergency leave, a decision that immediately triggered 5 anxious scenarios in the archive about his job security, and drove until the neon sprawl of Rydia became a faint, hazy smudge in his rearview mirror. He eventually found the small, almost hidden community nestled in the foothills, presided over by an aged scholar known only as the Keeper. The Keeper wasn't a monk in the traditional sense. He was an old man with hands like weathered oak and eyes that seemed to hold the quiet patience of geological time. He found him not meditating, but meticulously sorting a pile of smooth gray river stones outside a simple, unpainted wooden cabin. Elias, or in this version, Ravi, bowed awkwardly, the stiff fabric of his tailored suit protesting the movement. "Keeper," Elias managed, his voice hoarse from disuse and honest conversation. "I am drowning. My mind is a storm. I have achieved everything I was told to want, yet I cannot breathe. I carry a weight that no one else can see. I need you to show me how to put it down." The Keeper did not immediately respond. He picked up one of the stones, testing its weight with his thumb before tossing it back on the pile with a soft clack. He then pointed to a long, thick piece of hemp rope lying beside him. It was knotted in several places, stiff and clearly very old. "Elias Thorne," the Keeper's voice was low, like water moving over bedrock. "The wheat you carry is not invisible. It is solid, but you mistake it for air. You are an architect, yes? You build structures. Now, you will build a new one." He handed Elias the rope. "This rope is your life, starting now. For every single thought that enters your mind, every regret from yesterday, every fear about tomorrow, every judgment about me, about this rope, about the shoes you wore this morning, you will tie a knot in this rope." Elias frowned. This was the opposite of efficiency. "Keeper, with all respect, I have 1,000,000,000 thoughts a day. This rope will be a monstrous braid by evening." "Precisely," the Keeper said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Then you will have a physical representation of the burden you drag through your actual single day. Go, tie the knots. Do not censor. Do not judge. Simply record." The weight of testimony. Elias returned to the clearing an hour later. The rope, which had started at maybe 6 feet long, was now nearly 30 feet of dense, tangled hemp. It was ugly. The knots were haphazard. Some were tight, some were loose loops, some were intricate snarls where 2 separate anxieties had fought for dominance. It was heavy, stiff, and completely unmanageable. He held it up, almost ashamed. "This is exhausting." The Keeper nodded, taking the rope. He didn't look at the knots. He looked at Elias's hands, which were chafed red from the friction. "You've cataloged your mental load, Elias. Now, you will carry it. Take this rope and walk the perimeter of this clearing. You must carry it draped over your shoulder. Do not drop it. Do not coil it. Let it drag. Walk until you feel the rope has ceased to be an object and has become a part of your own skeletal structure." Elias began to walk. The first few circuits were easy. He was still observing the process. This knot is the argument with my father in 2012. This one is the fear of recession in Q4. By the 10th circuit, the rope was slapping against his leg rhythmically. By the 20th, the thick hemp was digging a painful groove into his shoulder muscle. He started to stumble. The weight wasn't just on him, it was pulling him toward the earth. He tried to walk faster to get it over with, but the drag became insurmountable. He had to slow down to a painful, shuffling gait just to keep moving. He stopped after an hour, breathing heavily, the rope hanging like a dead python from his shoulder. "Keeper," he gasped, leaning against the pine tree, sweat staining his expensive shirt. "I cannot. It is too much. It is literally preventing me from moving forward." The Keeper stepped forward and gently laid a hand on the rope, right over a particularly gruesome triple knot Elias remembered tying after receiving a poor performance review in his early 20s. "Tell me, Elias," the Keeper asked calmly, "is the rope
inherently heavy, or did you tie it that way?
I tied it that way, Elias admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I made every knot as significant as the last, or more so.
And when you tied them, the keeper pressed, did you consider not tying that particular one? Did you consider pausing, stepping away, and only tying it later, or perhaps not at all?
Elias shook his head slowly. No. The moment the worry arose, the knot followed automatically. It was instinct. It felt necessary to document the danger.
Ah, the keeper sighed, the sound full of ancient understanding. The necessity of documentation. You believe that by solidifying the worry, by tying the knot, you have somehow neutralized the threat. You have not. You have merely created a heavy, permanent anchor that ensures you can never outrun the danger you are trying to avoid. The unraveling ceremony. This was the critical juncture. Ravi Elias looked at the rope, seeing not a metaphor, but the physical reality of his last 10 years. He saw the thousands of tiny, self-inflicted wounds that, when bundled together, became a crippling disability. The keeper then led him to a nearby small, shallow fire pit where a small, controlled flame danced. A gentle, warm heat, not an inferno. We will not cut the rope, Elias. Cutting implies a sudden severing, and the memory of the cut will linger, perhaps prompting you to tie another out of fear of loss. We will unravel it. We will perform the ceremonial release of the unnecessary. He picked up the end of the rope, finding a loose loop near the middle. He carefully, deliberately, began to work the knot loose with his practiced fingers. This knot, he murmured as the fibers separated, is the fear that your presentation tomorrow will fail. Look at it. It is just thread. It is just friction. It is nothing more than the shape you forced it into. He pulled the first knot completely apart. The rope became instantly and noticeably lighter where the knot had been. The keeper then handed the rope back to Elias. Your turn. Find the next knot that seems easiest to undo. Do not start with the biggest one. Start with the one that already shows signs of weakness. Elias hesitated, then found the knot he recalled tying yesterday afternoon, a misplaced key. It was a small, shallow loop. With trembling fingers, he worked it open. Click! It was gone. A minuscule shift in weight, but an undeniable one. For the next 4 hours, under the quiet guidance of the keeper, Elias sat by the fire pit and performed cognitive deconstruction. He didn't fight the thoughts. He acknowledged them. Yes, I remember that moment of embarrassment. But instead of tying a new knot to document the feeling of embarrassment, he gently teased the old one apart. He watched the fibers relax, the tension disappear, and the rope segment regain its original limp flexibility. He unraveled the knots representing old arguments, minor slights, forgotten financial worries, and every what-if scenario he had meticulously planned. He found that the strongest knots were often tied around the smallest initial concerns. The fear of being slightly late had become a knot of crippling self-loathing. The minor criticism from a high school teacher had become the anchor of his imposter syndrome. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows that seemed less threatening now, the rope in Elias's lap grew progressively shorter. The dense, heavy 30-foot braid transformed into a manageable, perhaps 4-foot length of slightly singed but mostly relaxed hemp. When he finally reached the last knot, a massive, complicated weave near the original end, he paused. This last one, it feels like it holds the whole rope together. If I undo this, I might just drift away. The keeper smiled, the first genuine wide smile Elias had seen from him. Elias, the rope was never held together by the knots. The rope holds itself together by its continuity. The knots were just the evidence of your resistance to that continuity. Then, He pointed to the small, gentle fire. Throw the final knot in the fire. Do not struggle. Let the heat do the work. Watch it become ash. Nothing solid, nothing to carry. Elias dropped the final massive knot into the embers. It curled, blackened, and within seconds crumbled into fine, weightless gray dust that the evening breeze immediately carried away over the distant tree line.
The architecture of presence. Elias stood up. He was still tired, but it was the satisfying fatigue of physical exertion, not the corrosive depletion of mental warfare. He held the remaining short piece of rope, which was light enough to be a forgotten belt. "What do I do with this now?" he asked, his voice clear. "You keep it," the keeper said, not as a reminder of your worry, but as a testament to your choice. You now know, physically and mentally, the difference between the material of your life and the knots you choose to tie within it. He looked back toward the city where the lights were just beginning to pierce the twilight. The world outside will continue to generate stresses, Elias. Your job will require foresight. Your parents will age. Bills will arrive. The thoughts will not stop. That is the nature of an active mind. But you are no longer the clerk sorting through the archive. You are the architect of presence. The keeper laid out the ultimate lesson, the core motivation. Peace is not the environment you wait for. It is the action you choose in the present moment. You do not wait for the storm to pass. You learn to build your shelter with the materials available right now. The moment you recognize a thought as a knot that does not serve this second, you have the divine authority and the only true power you possess to choose not to tie it or to immediately unravel the one already fastened. Elias Thorne did not go back to Viridia the same man. He returned to his high-rise apartment, but he no longer saw the view as a measurement of his status. He saw it as a vast, indifferent canvas that offered a perspective deeper than his desk. He began his work differently. When a catastrophic scenario arose, instead of immediately building a complex contingency plan in his mind and on paper, he would pause. He would silently feel the slight tightening in his chest, the ghost of a knot forming, and he would deliberately relax his breath instead. He would address the immediate, actionable step first. The rest? That was potential future debris, and he was no longer a full-time waste collector for what hadn't happened yet. His colleagues noticed the change. He was still precise, but he was quick. He was decisive, but he was calm. He wasn't avoiding problems. He was simply refusing to carry the emotional scaffolding of a problem before it manifested. He was lighter. He was effective. He finally understood that the highest form of control is not controlling the world, but controlling one's voluntary engagement with the world's chaos. Elias Thorne learned that the invisible albatross was never dropped from the sky. It was meticulously constructed, feather by feather, regret by regret. Not by self-imposed knot, by the only person who had the authority to build it, himself. And because he built it, he held the blueprint for its dismantling. The silence he found wasn't the absence of noise. It was the profound, beautiful quiet that followed the final deliberate unburdening of what was never his to carry in the first place. He didn't find peace. He excavated it from beneath the rubble of his own making. The lesson echoes. We all have that rope. We all carry the knots of what we should have said, what we might do wrong, and what could happen next week. The motivation isn't to stop the thoughts. That's impossible. The motivation is to recognize the knot for what it is, an act of voluntary labor. Every time you choose to hold on to a regret,
You are choosing to carry a stone you already know is heavier than you are. What are the 3 most prominent stiff knots on your rope right now? Take a breath. Find the loose end of one and begin the deliberate, powerful, and utterly freeing act of the unraveling. Your freedom is waiting, not in the future, but in the conscious decision to drop what you are holding right now.